Welcome to the Skill Ranch. This podcast is designed to equip entrepreneurs, professionals, and consultants with skills to impact tomorrow's work environment. Now here's your host, Bilal.
Hi, Mike, and welcome to the SkillRanch Podcast. How are you doing today?
Excellent. Thanks so much for having me. I've seen some of your podcasts so far, love it, and just excited to be here with you.
I'm also very happy to have you here and learning from your experience around business development. So, for our audience today, could you please give a bit of background about your professional experience?
Sure. Thanks so much. I've had a passion for new and developing businesses, dating back to my first job as a buyer for a major department store. And shortly after I started my career, I pursued an MBA in new and emerging businesses, was immediately picked up by Victoria's Secrets and brought on board during the days that the pink line was just a test concept. And in about 3 years, we grew that business to $1 billion, and I was hooked. After that, that's what I did everywhere I went. I would build a new brand or category of business, and then build a team to support it. So I eventually decided I was going to go on my own, and now I'm helping smaller than $1 billion businesses achieve what I've done in the past.
That's very nice to hear about. So on today's episode, we are going to discuss about Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. And in the current scenario, how have they affected us in different ways? So for our audience, Mike, could you please share a bit about what is Maslow's hierarchy?
Yes. So Maslow was a psychology professor. He talked about how we progress as humans, and talked about how we can only go so far up this hierarchy if our needs are not met at the most basic level. So I'll just walk you through this, and then I'll give you an extreme example. I think everybody will understand where we're at. So basically, at the bottom of the pyramid, you'll see the physiological needs. So that's food, water, oxygenated blood flow to the brain, basically the things we absolutely need to stay alive. And there's been a lot of science around the fact that, we still have the instincts that our ancestors did when they were living on the plains and a saber-toothed tiger attacked them, for instance, is one of the popular articles and examples. So that saber-toothed tiger attacks us, and our body ramps up the stress because it's the most important thing we can do is stay alive. So people still feel that stress, although it's not a saber-toothed tiger, right? It might be a deadline at work. It might be a little financial problems right now, certainly unemployment. So our bodies will actually react as if we are being attacked when we're worried about how we're going to feed our family tomorrow, for instance. How are we going to survive? The second level up is safety. So that's, shelter typically can be either safety or physiological, and we'll talk about how that plays a little different role as we talk about the customers. But, in general, it's just, personal security. So, employment just to be employed, not even at the level of feeding ourselves, but, to have a job and feel like, we're safe, secure, and have a level of comfort. And without those two things, we cannot progress up this pyramid. So the next rung would be love and belonging. So family, friendship, and keep in mind this keyword community come in at that level. Finally, we can then progress to our own esteem. It could be just self-confidence, status, self-respect, respect of others. And finally, we move on to self-actualization, which is, slide here says achieving one's full potential. But really, that could be, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here, right? Those big questions that all humans, want to know, want to solve. But they're not thinking about them if they just had a breakup, for example, right? They don't feel that love and belonging anymore. So they're not trying to be their best. Typically you end up in that mourning phase, right? So, easy example is everything's going great in your life. You are at the top of the pyramid. You are pursuing self-actualization. You're on your way to a Buddhist temple, as part of your search for the meaning of life and your own personal self-actualization. You're driving, you're smiling, everything's happy and great. A plastic bag flies into your car and covers your face. Well, you were just pursuing the meaning of life. Why would you stop? Well, because you have to, because your body is going to tell you to pull that car over or stop it or rip that plastic bag off your face, because the very first element is we have to stay alive. So that's my extreme example of, just how we can't pursue the higher levels when we don't have the more basic levels, achieved for us.
So I really like your example about the plastic bag. And for many of us, this pandemic has been that kind of a plastic bag. Many of us are graduating and looking for that great opportunity. Many of the students had that internship that was lined up, but due to COVID, that has been cancelled. Or businesses that were looking for good revenues over the summer. All of those activities have been affected. If you take the example of businesses further, the customers are also affected during this crisis. And where do you see the customers being for the next 6 to 12 months? In which of the 5 level would you expect them to be? And how can companies navigate their selling strategies in order to be well placed in the market and be customer centric according to the needs of their customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a research assistant this summer. She's fabulous. She's from the University of Cincinnati and she's studying psychology. And really, I brought her on board to help me understand how are humans reacting with their dollar, right? Their spending in relation to the psychology of this pandemic. So a few just really broad examples, things people haven't thought about, just to help us get grounded in where customers are today. So I mentioned earlier, that personal security and shelter can fall under safety needs, right? So if we have a roof over our head or we're protected enough from the elements, the shelter can move up to safety. And it's a nesting concept. It isn't necessarily even safety from a burglar. It's really that sense of security is probably a better word, more like secure. And our homes are very important in that sense to us. So as an example of nesting activities, in the first quarter of this year when COVID hit, most retailers, we've actually seen companies like L Brands is doing a massive layoff. J.C. Penney is going to have to shutter hundreds of stores and most likely be go through bankruptcy and potentially merge with Belk. Just some of the major retailers here in America. But while they were getting hammered, the home repair stores had, between Lowe's and Home Depot, which are our two biggest home improvement centers in America, they both doubled to tripled their trend that they were on prior to COVID hitting. So you can see people are spending money on their home. They're in that safety and security level. Several other another one we saw. So at the end of April, we researched, this was past any real food shortages. And in the US, we ran shortages on certain products. Like you might not be able to buy your favorite soup, but there might still be 5, 6, 10 other soups there to buy. They were out of some of the most popular ones, right? There was some milk for a minute, but at no point was anybody at risk of starving due to food shortages in America. It just may have had to make a different choice as to what you buy. But yet, in the month of April, we studied seed companies, so that people who sell seeds for vegetable gardens. Their sales of the companies we researched were up 75 to 400%. And the president of the largest seed company in the U.S. said that the seed industry hadn't seen anything like that since the Great Depression, right? So people were really, in that mode. So let's think about food, right? Food security is part of the physiological needs. So that's all the way down on the bottom rung. But people wanted to have some sense of control over the most basic things in life: food, water, and oxygenated blood flow to the brain, as I say. So it just shows you that people are really in those first two buckets, right? Wanting to have control over their food, and then nesting. Pool and spa sales were up. Just people were improving their homes. Most likely the money came from vacations that were canceled, if you will. But that's where people are.
Like example of retail companies, everybody needs food, and those companies even were in those phases which they were allowed to open, like medical stores, hospitals. All of those were a priority for everyone. And on the other hand, we saw certain like luxury brands or big car manufacturers, they went into manufacturing masks or manufacturing ventilators, which provided them an alternative way to connect with the needs of the companies in those two areas, which is physiological needs and the safety needs. In your expertise and experience, how would some of the companies in different sectors connect with their employees, with their customers during these periods?
Yeah, no, that's great. So, yeah, I've been working with my clients on changing the messaging. So it's important to understand that customers, first of all, customers buy on emotion, and then later we justify our purchase logically. But it's emotions that make us, pull the trigger, if you will, the emotions that make us actually take the step to make a purchase. So using that, I've literally laid this out. And when we talk about customers' emotions, we're really talking about where are their needs for safety, physiological needs. And we'll talk about love and belonging right now, because we're starting to get there as well. So for instance, a paper company, a printer, right? So we have a printer that I work with. Now, they never did delivery before, but restaurants were hammered, and that's a lot of what they did was print the fancy menus for restaurants. Well, we got here, and customers are in this safety mode, so they don't want to touch a menu that someone else just touched. So what we did was we put together a package where we would print lesser quality menus. They wouldn't have the lamination. It would just be a piece of paper, because it's a single use. We're going to throw that away, right? So we appealed to the restaurants through their customer sense of safety, and put together a package where we would print lower quality, but still nice, but single use menus. And we bunched a group of restaurants together in one area and said, if you all buy, we'll do free delivery to this area. And I think we got like 85% or so of the restaurants in. So it was financially made sense to do the delivery as well. So again, just looking at the needs, restaurants didn't want to spend money, but if they're going to spend any money at all, it's going to be making customers feel safe, because that's what's keeping them away from a restaurant right now. So just a little example on the safety and how we've played on that. For love and belonging, also, so things in America, I know our numbers are increasing, but people are actually getting out more, and more things are opening up. So when you look under love and belonging, I said, let's note this word community, because I knew we'd get here at some point today. It's a very important next step. We can all argue whether or not people should be doing it now, but they are doing it. So let's just acknowledge that they are. I'm not here to say it's right or wrong. And this is also going to happen several other times as, COVID flares up in certain places, they close down and then they open up. Just remember, once people feel safe and they're getting signals from the government who's opening things up, so they're feeling a little more safe, the next step is that love, belonging, and I like to mention community. So we're still not having big weddings, right? So I've worked with some catering companies. Rather than have a big wedding, let's go to the neighborhoods that have a nice space for people to spread out, and we'll do catering for a neighborhood party so people can get that sense of community back, right? They want to have that in some sense. They don't have it with the wedding, but we can still provide for that level and that want and desire for relationships, and cater to a neighborhood party in a big open space on blankets. So that's been successful as well.
Yeah, there were two interesting things. One, your example about the wedding, and the other one about the collaboration that you shared about that printing company. And it showcases the importance of collaborating together with each other and developing partnerships. So during the time of COVID, like even in our company, we utilize the time to develop partnerships where, of course, the revenues won't come tomorrow, but we identified a win-win relationship where over time, as everything subsides, there are two parties that have skill set to help each other succeed and be together successful. So in your experiences, the businesses that you work with or in individual settings even, how have you seen people like collaborating together and brought up benefits for the both parties?
Yeah, one of the best examples that I've seen is a lot of online networking right now. And so people are coming together. They're frustrated because they're not meeting new people organically, right? You can't, you're not going to Jimmy's soccer game or, Sally's dance recital where you can meet someone who may be a potential client for you if you're in a service industry, right? So working with architects, CPAs, attorneys, I've been directing them to different online networks where they can now still continue to meet people. And most of these groups, if they're run right, they're not selling to each other, but they're serving as a connection point. So let's look at you and I. Let's say you and I each know 100 great people who would be perfect clients for each other, right? So I could talk to you and try to sell to you, and then I made one sale. Or I could talk to 100 people and perhaps make, depending on the close rate, 5 or 10 sales, right? So they're using these collaborative communities. I don't call it networking. I call it collaborative communities to help people get the introductions that normally would come organically.
Yes, and even if you take the example of LinkedIn, you see individuals are taking time out to help individual who want to have a job. You see if somebody posts that I'm looking for a job, many individuals are now open to helping them out, connecting with individuals. So it has helped to bring everything as a community is coming together. Like sometimes before the pandemics, if somebody is just asking for a job, that might seem a bit unprofessional. But now people are willing to help each other and going that extra step, like who is in within my network that I can introduce to you that can help you land the next client or the next job. And maybe like some of the win, although the situation is very not not that good whatever happened in the past 5 to 6 months, but if we want to see like one or two positives, one would be that as a whole the global community has came together and they want each other to succeed in whichever way they can be of value to them. But let's say discuss a scenario post pandemic. How do you see the customer's reaction according to Maslow's hierarchy, let's say a year to 1 to 2 years from now? How would that change, and to what extent do you feel individuals returning back to their normal schedule?
Yeah, so at least for the next year to 2 years, I think that we're going to see basically that second level safety and that third level love and belonging, which is, family, friendship, community. I think we're going to still see a lot of people in those places. So we're still going to want to um, have friendships and build a community, but we're only going to want to do it if it's safe. There's going to be that sense of what if or what's next, at least for a while. Now we're human, so we have very short-term memory, or we wouldn't have so many wars. So we do repeat ourselves. In fact, just a sidebar, one of my favorite quotes is, you ask, why do we study history? And most people say so we don't repeat it. But a gentleman that I follow says, no, we study history because we're going to repeat it, and so we learn how to take advantage of it when we do again. So anyway, but definitely for the next 1 to 3 years, we're gonna not be traveling to the Buddhist temple, if you will, right? We're not going to get to that self-actualization. Some people will, as they get their vaccine and they feel safe and secure and they know that their family's been vaccinated, they're going to get out and they're going to have some money saved up because they may have skipped 2 years of vacations and a year of restaurant visits and all of the other expenses that you really don't even have an opportunity to spend your money on. And they're going to buy status symbols again, that new fancy car, the Tesla, nice jewelry. Just you're gonna see that start to happen, but I think it's going to happen after we get either a vaccine or the numbers really start to die down. Should the winter season sort of force us all to shelter because it's cold and the virus doesn't have a chance to replicate, or it has trouble replicating in the cold. Should that happen, you may see it, but for the most part, until we have some sort of confidence, I think we're going to be trying to live in a community, trying to stay, have friends, and yet we're only going to do it if it's safe, right? Because we can't move up to that level of the pyramid if we haven't gotten our safety needs. So we have to feel safe before we can move much farther up. I've worked with travel agents to talk about as, things open up, and we've actually sat down and planned out based on psychology. Okay, what does travel look like? Well, right now it's probably people, maybe a family getting a cabin in the woods somewhere, right? So we can get away, we can go on vacation, but we're not going to go to Disney World in a crowd like that, right? So maybe we'll go rent a cabin and do some nature tours or something along those lines. And cruise ships, even though they actually aren't as dangerous as it seems, they're actually one of the more healthy, especially if everybody enters the cruise ship with no symptoms. but it just feels like you're in tight quarters the whole time, right? And it feels like if one person's sick, everyone's going to get sick. So that is, last. So planning that out and using this hierarchy and sitting down and thinking about your business. And as things open up and people begin to move up this, there are different ways to communicate with them based on their level of security. And then after they've had a chance to build their community, and then after they've had a chance for their esteem, then you could talk about self-actualization, be your best, those sorts of things. But yeah, it's important to sit down and think about this and just know that none of us know the time, exactly when it's going to happen, but just to be prepared strategically based on when it feels like people are on this step. Now I can put this marketing campaign in place. Oh, feels like people have moved up. Now I can put this marketing campaign in place. So I encourage people to do that now and be prepared as the signals are showing themselves in the future. Be prepared to already have your message to send.
And thinking on a strategic level, like the senior management of companies. So let's say if you were the head of sales for or like an airline or a travel company or a restaurant chain, like those are some of the most affected areas. And on the other hand, if I would say that once again you are the head of sales of, let's say, a company such as Ferrari, that's a luxury brand, or one of the jewelry brands, how would you go about creating your strategies around sales in both of these scenarios?
Yes. So if I am in the esteem business, right? So the high-end jewelry or the Ferrari, um, right now I'd batten down the hatches, if you will. I mean, I would keep things tight, keep my inventories tight. Um, it this pyramid holds true, and people, like I said, with the bag in your face when you're driving to the Buddhist temple, your body, your mind will not let you pursue these higher levels of the hierarchy if you haven't taken care of the lower ones. I like to use the example. Let's say we have a doctor, and her husband is a nurse. So both of them have been working and even gotten overtime. So financially, while many people have been impacted significantly, this couple actually is better off than they were, right? Working longer hours they may not like, but they're actually getting, paid even more. So they could afford that Ferrari, but they're not emotionally able to pursue that when they are sitting at home each night worried about who they came in contact with that day. Emotionally, it would be very hard for Ferrari to sell to them because their emotions are too focused on safety and not yet opened up to the level of esteem. So it would just be difficult right now. Even for people who financially weren't impacted, emotionally, they've definitely changed.
Yeah, no, that was a nice flow on the customer centric view. Let's shift our focus on towards the sales team. Sales is about going to events and presenting your like product launch, like solutions. But now majority, or even like in some cases even 100% of the sales are being done in a virtual environment through like Zoom as we are talking. So how do we connect with our customer in that scenario? What are some of your tips and advice for a sales professional to connect well with their audience?
Sure. I'm going to use a slightly different example to get us started just outside of sales because it resonates very well. So I've spoken to multiple business leaders in corporate America, and they'll say, I just don't know I have no visibility to what's going on with my team. I feel like productivity has been hurt and I don't know why. And I'll ask them, well, can you bring this up in your next touch base? Well, we kind of canceled those with COVID. We weren't really, like, well, if you don't have a touch base, you're not going to know what's going on with your business, right? And what happened was it just caught us all off guard. It's nobody's fault. They're not stupid people. But it caught us all off guard. And it's almost like we started thinking about business from ground zero, as if there was no prior knowledge. And we're trying to build something around this strange thing. So what I encourage them all to do is, well, what worked in, pre-COVID environment? What was working well? Well, in my touch bases, I had good visibility. Okay, well then shouldn't you have those? And now it just has to be virtual. And I tell that story because I think the most important thing to do for anyone is to define what was really impacted by COVID. Many people are at home using the laptop that they used to carry in and put in their docking station in the office, right? And they used to IM and send emails and use, shared folders and all of those things. So what has really changed? What I think it is, the thing that I see the most, and we can shift now back to sales team. I just spoke a little more generically there previously. The biggest thing to me is the water cooler talk, right? So, the water cooler where people, end up congregating and it gets the reputation of being gossip central, right? Everyone's just going to talk about everybody else. But in honesty, there's, if you look and just read case studies, anecdotally, water cooler talks may be responsible for trillions of dollars in results for company, whether it's sales or lowered expenses. And all it is we've taken a break from what we're doing. We've walked away from our task. We've taken a break, we've walked away, and we ran into the right person. So maybe it's two heads of teams, one in sales and one in marketing. And the person in sales says the marketing team's not giving me the right tools. And the person in marketing feels the sales team is not executing those tools properly. The two of them come together outside of a meeting with no pressure, no agenda, nobody pushing to move the meeting fast. And they run into each other in the hallway or at the water cooler or the coffee station, and they just talk. And they're going to talk about business eventually because that's the thing they both have in common. They're on a similar team. And that's where problems get solved, because that's where, oh, I didn't understand this tool did that. Oh, well, the other tool that you think is working, in this way, what we really need is, we don't need to accomplish that. We need to accomplish this. So, they could both make a change. And I think that's important. And one of the ways you can sort of simulate that is Zoom calls with breakout sessions, and just force it. We're going to have a breakout session, and it's a, mandatory call, or you could have a series of them throughout the week, and please try to attend 2 if you don't want to make it mandatory. Keep it more open. Please try to attend 2 of these, and we're going to have little breakout groups. Maybe it's while you're eating lunch, whatever that is, from noon to 1. We're going to bring people together, eat your lunch, talk a little bit. Doesn't have to be business, but knowing that it'll eventually get there. So I think we can replace a lot of what we've lost if we take the time to say, what is the true difference right now? What did we lose when we went virtual? And then replace it as best you can electronically.
Very well explained there, Mike. In our last conversation, you mentioned a term that I would like you to again share with the audience. What is the difference between KPI and KRI that you shared with me last time?
Yes. So, just a little background. So as companies, leaders feel that they're losing visibility to the productivity of the team or the status of projects. One of the things that's very important is metrics. And I just wrote an article on this earlier this week. And one of the things that I encourage is shorter and easier goals. That doesn't mean less work. I just mean smaller goals, I guess, with shorter timelines. Um, so you're checking in more often, and um, so that's important. So, but how do we measure progress, right? So there's a term out there, KPIs, which stands for key performance indicators, that everybody uses a little bit differently. And I'm not going to say it's wrong. I use them differently than everyone else. So, I look at KPIs, it's a performance, it's something you perform. So it's more of a measure of activities. And KRIs as your key results indicators. So that's truly your results. So as a result, I need a certain sales volume, a certain average sale price, a certain margin that I need to make on those sales. And to me, those would be your KRIs, the results of what you do. Your KPIs, the performance might be, well, how many networking hours did I need to get in this week? Or how many hours did I need to spend in CAD to do the drawings for this week? How many touch bases as a business analyst did I need to have outside of the IT world with the business versus in IT? Whatever those activities are what we should be measuring now, because those are the shorter and smaller goals versus monthly sales. If we're only measuring monthly sales, we don't know if we've been successful until the beginning of next month. But if we know to hit our sales, that sales team has to have a certain level of cold calls, a certain number of face-to-face, and then a certain close rate, we can monitor that throughout the month and provide more visibility to the leadership that feels like they've lost that.
Nice. And like if you have that, like performance indicators and the results indicator would help you also to sit with your team and have the best plan on what they need to focus upon to bring in that success at the end of the day. And following on the success, you had a great successful career in business development. If I would ask you to share 5 key points, advice that you would share with a person who is aspiring to be in the field of sales or business development, what would your 5 key advice for them?
Yeah, I would say step one is to clearly define your customer. Who is it? Do that first and wrap everything around it. And I don't mean in a cliche way. I mean truly define and tighten up your customer, because you're going to use that for the second piece of advice, is decide where they are and how they want you to speak with them, right? But if you don't know them, you already can't do step 2. Guess what? You can't do step 3 either. And this is really the most important, other than clearly defining your customers, because it's relying on that. This would be the most important, is once you know who they are and where they're at and how you want to communicate with them. And when I say how, I mean, it could be online, it could be through a billboard, it could be through a radio ad, a TV ad, a flyer that you stick on their doors. If you're a lawn mowing service, doesn't matter. But that's what I mean by where they are and how they want to interact with you. But number 3 is define the emotional triggers that the customer has when they're buying your product or service. Understand, I do a little 4-box grid. One of those boxes are fears. Another one is wants. Another box is frustrations. And the final box is aspirations. Take those 4 boxes and really define which emotions in each of those boxes align with your customer and your product. And take that for step 4 is define the language that you want to repeatedly use. This would be building your brand. And I know building a brand sounds like this big, massive thing, but really all it is taking the emotions we just talked about and repeatedly addressing those concerns through imagery and verbiage. That's actually building a brand. So that's step 4. Step 5 is stay positive. That's just the most important thing. Mindset is real. We are who we think we are. And, you know, if you're nervous, especially right now, maybe you're someone who's thinking about starting a new business. One of the best quotes I've ever heard on this is, don't let somebody with a $40,000 a year salary tell you that you don't have a multi-million-dollar idea, because they wouldn't know. So stay positive. If you believe in yourself, others will too. And that's the most, the best advice I can give for staying positive. I like that little quote. Remind yourself of it every day, especially if you're someone who maybe started a new business. Get rid of the naysayers.
But that quote is very powerful. Like, and mindset matters. Like, if you can't think of something in your mind, then it's very difficult to execute that at the end of the day. And the Walt Disney quote, if you can dream it, you can make it. So you need to dream about it, you need to be positive, and only then it will translate into success at the end of the day. And when we hear those success stories, usually we see the limelight, but the persistence, the motivation, the perseverance that that person went through, the struggle, the discouragement, the fear, the failures, and everything that were there throughout the journey, and that person overcome them. And at the end of the day, that is when success comes at the end. So my last question to you would be, since we have discussed about Maslow's, we discussed about sales, but something about you, a fun fact about you that you would like to share with the audience.
Oh, yeah, great. Um, so I like to get away. I definitely spent many years working 80-hour weeks in corporate America, in the grind, and a lot of that time was at home as well, right? So come home, maybe have dinner, and maybe forget about dinner, work like mad. But I also like to get away, and when I get away, I get far away. So I like to go to the mountains back in Pennsylvania in the U.S., and we have a little cabin there. It it has electricity, but no running water. I mean, it's a remote cabin. And I like to sit on the porch and listen to the stream in the back, and occasionally take a hike and do some fly fishing. So like I said, I work hard, but I don't play hard. So that's some people's quote, right? You work hard and you play hard. I work hard and then I play soft.
Nice, nice. And thank you so much, Mike, for taking time out today for the SkillRanch podcast. And it was great learning from your experiences.
Oh, thanks so much for having me again. I've been a fan of the show, and really happy to be a part of it now.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, for those who are interested in what we covered today and would like to dive in further, I do offer services, obviously, to help with this, both one-on-one and in a group setting. And one of the best ways, if you were interested in my answer to the top 5 pieces of advice, all of those and more are covered in a 12-week workshop that I provide. It's priced at less than the cost of one mistake you'd make if you don't take the workshop, because it's in a group setting. So multiple people are working together, sharing ideas with their own businesses. I do it virtually, so anyone in the world is welcome. And I run the classes every few months. So get in touch with me. I can let you know when the next class is going to start, whenever you're ready. Be happy to share with you the agenda, but basically we start with mindset and goal setting. We move into how to develop metrics to monitor those goals that we just established, and work towards a one-page strategic plan. And then in order to execute the plan, which is typically around growth, we talk about customers, how to market to them, how to brand the business. So it's a great foundation for anybody who's either starting a business or is stuck in their business. In other words, it's gotten to be as big as it can be with just them, and they need a little outside help. So lots of ways to work with me. If you just have a simple question, feel free to shoot an email to me. I'll be happy to respond, try to answer your question, and we'll go from there.
And for everyone, the details of Mike would be shared around with our LinkedIn post and on other social media channels. Thank you so much again, Mike, and it was a pleasure talking to you today.
Yes, thanks for having me again. It's great.
Bye-bye. So thank you everyone, and I'm looking forward to having you all on the next episode of SkillRanch Podcast.